questionnaire construction and qualitative research. I know the two don't really go together very well, but what the heck? Only 3 more weeks to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I've been reading a lot about artificial intelligence here lately. I was going to write a chapter for my 321 class about artificial intelligence. Turns out artificial intelligence can't interpolate. It cannot. It ca- it it has information as long as the information is old information. If I mean, it can't create information. It can't put two things together and come up with something new. It just can't do that. And the reason is because it's just a rote answering machine. All it does is give you the answers that people have come up with before. And I was thinking about this as I was walking around my property, and I was thinking, well, if that's all it is intelligence the ability to remember what people have told you, or is intelligence the ability to come up with new ideas? If we look at all of the people that are supposed to be the smartest people that have ever existed, do we are they really the people that have just keep saying the same thing over and over again and with no new information? Or is it people that come up with new ideas? So is intelligence creative, or is intelligence the ability to repeat? Uh, I don't know. I'll have to I'll have to ponder that because if you think about it, doctors are doctors because they take what has people have told them in the past, and they cure people that using those ideas. Now, sometimes they come up with new medications or new procedures, but most doctors don't do that. Most doctors just follow the same protocols. Um, so the most intelligent people are the people that have all the money, the people that make the most money are doctors and lawyers, and doctors and lawyers just talk about what has happened in the past. They don't come up with new ideas. Anyway, okay, so our creative thinkers are artists, our artists, our novelists, our philosophers. These are people that come up with new ideas. You're not going to be touted as a genius if you if you just keep repeating what other people have said. However, you can become a college professor if you think about it. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about questionnaire construction. We'll talk about artificial intelligence more in the future. Maybe I'm trying to finish this book. It's really kind of irritating because he keeps saying, well, there is no such thing as artificial intelligence. It's just repeating what it has been told, and actually it has to do with protocols. Protocols. When these two pieces of information come together, then you give this answer. That's what's going on with ChatGPT. You're asking, if you ask ChatGPT to write you a paper about uh, American Indian alcoholism, it will probably give you a paper about Asian Indians, because there are as many Asian Indians in the United States as there are American Indian, Native American indigenous peoples. So it would probably do that, because a lot of the artificial intelligence is coming out of Southern Asia. So when you say Indian, they think people from India. Yeah. Okay. Well, and that's what it will give you. It will give you alcoholism rates. And it probably won't have anything to do with American Indians. It won't have anything to do with Native American indigenous peoples of the Americas. Anyway, so let's get into questionnaire construction. The foundation of all questionnaires is, of course, the question. The questionnaire must translate the research objectives into specific questions. Answers to such questions will provide the data for hypothesis testing. The question must also motivate the respondent to provide the information being sought. The major considerations involved in formulating questions are their content, their structure, the format, and the sequencing. And let me show you an example. Okay, let me show you an example. I have it right here. I think I do. UCLA loneliness scale. Come on, you can do it. And or it's not working. There it is. Okay. I am happy doing so many things alone. I can't remember what O is. Often. S is sometimes, and R is rarely, and N is never. Okay, so you have to answer often, sometimes, rarely, or never. This is the UCLA loneliness scale. I have nobody to talk to. Often, okay, anyway, I cannot tolerate being so alone. Yeah, I lack companionship. Okay, so you're supposed to give them that kind of information. Does it happen often, sometimes, rarely, or never? Okay, let's get back to what we were talking about before. Survey questions may be concerned with facts, opinions, attitudes, respondents' motivation, and their level of familiarity with a certain subject. And I showed you the questionnaire I came up with. Of course, I put it together as a general Navajo knowledge test. It's a multiple choice question. Now you guys can get all these easily without any problem. I misspelled shit. No, I didn't misspell shit. Okay. You can get all these right without any even thinking about it, probably. But the vast majority of people in the United States have no clue who you guys are. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. What were we talking about? Oh, he was talking. He was talking about minorities. It was from my old college, Wabash College, and of course it's in Indiana, and they're fairly ignorant about American Indians, of course. And he was saying, "Well, look at all the things we do for minority people." And I said, "Yeah, that may be true, but your knowledge base, as far as minorities are concerned, is not universal. You don't understand about this group of individuals. I mean, there's 5 million American Indians in the United States, and here you guys just kind of ignore them. Most people think they still live in teepees." And of course, I didn't give him the quiz, but it was kind of interesting to watch him tap dance around the questions because he had no clue. You say you teach on the Navajo Nation, and I'm not sure what they think. Anyway, I'll tell you what, I'm going to see this guy on the 9th of August, so I'll give him the Navajo Nation general knowledge test and see how he does. He's a lawyer, so I'm sure he can, lawyers are good at tap dancing. The largest coal-burning energy plant in the United States. You guys closed it down. Way to go. Okay, let's get back to the lecture. Most questions, however, can be classified in one of two general categories, either factual questions or questions about subjective experiences. So what we just saw, the UCLA loneliness scale, had to do with subjective experiences. The general Navajo Nation knowledge test was factual questions. Those were all facts. Factual questions are designed to elicit objective information from the respondents regarding their backgrounds, environments, habits, and the like. The most common type is the background question, asked mainly to provide information that can be used to classify respondents. What was the last grade you completed in school? And this is one of the questions I had on my questionnaire. And from this, we calculated how much education they had. There are 4 reasons why respondents give less than accurate answers to factual questions. They do not know the information. They cannot recall the information. They do not understand the question. They are reluctant to answer. I mean, there are some questions that if you ask just about anybody, they probably will not be able to give you a very accurate answer. One of them is, how many times a week do you poop? I just read an article about this. And it was saying, well, some people say that you have to do this, and some people say you have to do that. But the reality is we're all different, and they gave you a range that was normal, and it had to do with how do you feel? That is your abdomen? Do you feel bloated? If you're feeling bloated, then maybe you've got a problem. But here, one of the complaints is that because of commercials, because people that sell laxatives have to sell more and more laxatives, they try to convince everybody that they need to have more bowel movements than they really need. Okay, that's one. Well, that's one of the questions that people are reluctant to answer. Another would be, how many times do you shoot up with heroin? If somebody actually does shoot up with heroin, most people will say never, but if somebody actually does shoot up with heroin, they're not going to give you a very good answer. Probably they're not going to give you a very accurate answer. But here's an easier question. How many times a week do you have sex? This is another question that probably people are reluctant to answer. Men are going to give you an overestimation, and women are probably going to give you an underestimation, potentially, but it could be the other way around. I may be looking at things from an older person's perspective. We used to say that if you ask a woman how many sex partners they had, they will you take that number and subtract 3. And if you ask a man how many sex partners he's had, you take that number and you add 3. I'm sorry. If it's a woman, you add 3, and if it's a man, you subtract 3. But sometimes you could multiply it times 3 and get the right answer. These are some of those reluctant questions. It's just one of those things that people don't like to talk about. The researcher can take several steps to increase accuracy, including encouraging respondents to consult other members of the household, asking more than one question about the matter, repeating questions, making respondents feel comfortable when asking about events that they may find embarrassing. And of course, the famous Kinsey report was that way. It was talking to rural people about sex, and of course, this was back in the 1940s and 1950s. People were reluctant to talk about these things. And some people were embarrassed. And what they discovered was that they needed men to talk to men, and they needed women to talk to women. And it really didn't work very well if they reversed it. If a woman was interviewing a man, then a lot of times he started bragging. But if a man interviewed another man, then they rarely brag to each other because they know the other guys trying to pull the wool over the other guy's eyes. They know not to do it. Why kids ask questions over and over and why it's a good thing. That's true. Surveys conducted in the social sciences often include questions about attitudes. Attitudes are general orientations that encompass at least 4 domains, which include inner convictions, the innermost matters of the heart, evaluative judgments that express approval or disapproval, stimuli and normative structures, external but internalized, verbal behavior that actually corresponds to actual behaviors. The following is an example of a question to elicit a person's attitude on a subject. Please tell me whether or not you think it should be possible for a pregnant woman to obtain a legal abortion if there is a strong chance of serious defects in the baby. Yes, no, don't know, no answer. Attitudes can be described by content, what the attitude is about, direction, the positive, neutral, or negative, or intensity. An attitude may be held with greater or lesser vehemence. And of course, this topic is very poignant right now because there are states that are deciding that abortions should be illegal. As a matter of fact, the state of Iowa, just last week, the governor signed into law a 6-week ban on abortion. So if you're going to get an abortion, you have to do it within 6 weeks of getting pregnant. As interesting as that is. Attitudes versus opinions. Attitudes are often composed of various and related opinions. The researcher's task is to develop a composite of these opinions according to certain techniques. The composite of these opinions serves as the empirical analog to the concept of an attitude. This is why attitudes often cannot be measured using a single survey question. 3 types of question structures: closed-ended questions, open-ended questions, and contingency questions. Closed-ended questions, respondents are offered a set of answers and asked to choose the one that most closely represents their views. Do you think the product will be useful, yes or no? That's a closed-ended question. Closed-ended questions are easy to ask and quick to answer. Closed-ended questions require no writing by either respondent or interviewer. Closed-ended questions and analysis is straightforward. Closed-ended question major drawback is that they may introduce bias. By forcing the respondents to choose from given alternatives, by offering the respondent alternatives that might not be otherwise have come to their mind. Do you think this product will be useful? Well, there is no, well, maybe there's only a yes or a no. So you have to go, well, probably 60% of the time, I guess that's a positive, so I'll say yes. And of course, that it is still written down 100%. It's like voting. You vote for somebody, and if in your state they got the majority of the votes, then your vote is 100%. If it's no, I mean, if they missed it by 3 votes out of 5 million votes, they lost by 1 vote, it's still a no and it's still a 0. Open-ended questions are not followed by any kind of specified choice. The respondent's answers are recorded in full. An example: what do you personally feel are the most important problems the government in Washington should try to take care of? And of course, that's not a yes or no question. That's not one that you can say. Sometimes you have to give a multi-word answer to that question. Open-ended questions do not force the respondent to adapt to preconceived answers. Respondents can express thoughts, feelings freely and spontaneously and in their own language. If the answers to open-ended questions are unclear, the interviewer may probe by asking the respondent to explain further or to give a rationale for something stated earlier. Open-ended questions encourage rapport between the interviewer and the interviewee. Limitations of open-ended questions are they're difficult to answer. They're more difficult to analyze. The details of response might lose impact, validity, and design frame. And this is a real problem. So when you're taking down everything that somebody's saying, you have to interpret what they have just said. So how are you going to quantify that? How are you going to quantify answers or whatever? Oh, I just had two cardinals just flew past my window. Male cardinals. One must be the father and the other must be the fledgling, I'm guessing. 'Cause otherwise, they'd be flying at each other. There we go. Anyway, so and this can be very difficult, and you'll have to get more than one person to read that and to interpret what the individual said. And to categorize. Did he say this? Did he think that this was positive? And just how positive did he say that it was? You know, unless he said, "I think this is very positive. I am very positive about this." Unless he said something that definitive, then you're going to have to interpret whether it's a positive or a negative or a maybe. Closed-ended or open-ended questions depends on objectives of the questionnaire, respondent's level of information about the topic in question, the extent to which the topic has been thought through by the respondent, the ease which respondents can communicate the content of the answer to the extent to which respondents are motivated to communicate on the topic. A contingency question is a special case closed-ended question that applies only to a subgroup of respondents. The investigator determines the relevance of the question to this subgroup by asking all respondents a preceding filter question. Do you believe that the death penalty is ever justified? Yes or no? Please enter your gender, male or female. That's a contingency. The second is a contingency question. The formats for filter and contingency questions vary. One alternative is to write directions next to each response category of the filter question. Another common format is to use arrows to direct the respondents either to skip another question or to answer the contingency question. And I just had a questionnaire about my GP, my doctor, and it wanted to know what kind of in the last 6 months, what kind of an appointment I had. I was really kind of curious. Anyway, it's kind of curious because I had just seen him the day before. I got a stick in my eye when I was mowing, and he needed to clean it out. Anyway, contingency questions, a question that is used further only if the respondents give a particular answer. Are you stressed? No. If yes, if yes, then what are the reasons for that? And that's a contingency question. The second part of yes is a contingency question. The following is an example of a contingency question. Is this the first full-time job you have held since you graduated from college? Yes, no. What happened to the job you had before? Were promoted, laid off, or what? The company folded, laid off, or fired, job stopped, work was seasonal, quit voluntarily, promoted, relocated, other. And the second part of the no is this is the contingency question right here.
Yeah, because he works remotely most of the time.
One of the most common formats for questions in the social sciences is the rating scale. Below is an example of the 5-point Likert scale. Police should be allowed to conduct a full search of any motorist arrested for any offense such as speeding. Strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, and disagree strongly. So a Likert scale is a 5-point contingency. The response categories and rating scales are termed qualifiers. They reflect the intensity of the particular judgment involved. Strongly agree, depends, disagree, strongly disagree, too little, about right, too much, more, same, less. You know, those are all intensity questions. The matrix question is a method of organizing a large set of rating questions that have the same response categories. Indicate your reaction to each of the following statements. My vote gives me all the power I want to, in the government affairs. I strongly agree, I agree. Okay, anyway, we can read it all the way through. And we see what a, However, as with rating scales, ranking does not provide any information about the distance between the ranks. The difference between rank 1 and rank 2 may not be the same as the difference between rank 2 and rank 3. Below is an example of the ranking scale. I would like you to tell me what you have found important in life. Please look at this card and tell me which of these is the most important to you as a goal in your life, which comes next in importance, which is third, and which ranks fourth. A prosperous life, having a good income and being able to afford the things in life. And of course, this is the most important thing to you. Family life, an important life, a secure life. And you have to rank them. Answers to attitude questions in surveys can vary markedly depending on the preceding items in the questionnaire. Position of an item in a list has a significant impact on its being chosen. Respondents most often choose items that appear first on the list. That's known as the primacy effect. An example in the following question, respondents are more likely to assign the first rank to the first category than to the last one, simply because it is listed first. Among the items below, what does it take to get to be important and looked up by the other students here at school? Rank 1 through 6, coming from the right family, being popular, being an athlete star. Okay. Anyway, you see what we're saying. So because coming from the right family is the first one on the list, most people will pick that one. But you could shuffle them. Researchers can overcome this problem by acquainting respondents with the list of items before respondents are asked to reevaluate them, or randomizing the order of the questions. You could shuffle them with every question. And that's what your quizzes are. Your quizzes shuffle the answers. I mean, otherwise you could just say A every time.
Yes.
The opening question should be easy to answer, interesting, and non-controversial. Well, this has to do with a sequence of questions, so you want to make sure that the guy's going to stick with it. You don't want to put the hardest question first, otherwise they're going to go, "Damn, I'm not doing this. This is just too hard." So the first one has to be easy. It's also recommended that open-ended questions be placed later, as they usually require more time and thought, which may reduce the respondent's initial motivation to cooperate if they appear at the beginning. Really kind of interesting. I was taking a Trivial Pursuit. I was playing a Trivial Pursuit game yesterday, and that's exactly what I noticed. That the easiest questions always came first, and the hardest questions always came last. So what they were trying to do, they were trying to draw you in so that you would try to answer all the questions. I think it was a series of 6. 2 general patterns of question sequence that are most appropriate for motivating respondents to cooperate: funnel sequence and inverted funnel sequence. In funnel sequence, each successive question is related to the previous question and has a progressively narrower scope. Funnel sequences are helpful when the objective of the survey is to obtain detailed information. In inverted funnel sequence, the questions are narrower, followed by broader ones. So you have the narrower ones first and then the broader ones at the end. An inverted funnel sequence is helpful to obtain a generalization in the form of a judgment. The following questions from a funnel sequence. What do you think are some of the most important problems facing the nation? Of all the problems you have just mentioned, which do you think is the most important one? Where have you obtained most of your information about this problem? Do you read the Washington Post? In other words, they're trying to get you to read a good newspaper. Washington Post is a pretty good newspaper. Example: researchers is attempting to obtain the respondent's judgment regarding the effectiveness of rescue operations during a disaster. How many people do you suppose were killed in the tornado? How many do you suppose were injured so seriously that they had to go to the hospital? How long was it before most of the injured got to the hospital? Did you see anyone administer first aid by giving artificial respiration or stopping bleeding? Who was it? In general, how well do you think the first aid and rescue operations were carried out? Avoiding biases, pitfalls in questionnaire construction. Pitfalls, wording, questions must be clear, concise, and simple. Response set, avoiding sets of questions that might bias answers if lumped together. Leading questions, phrasing questions in a way to elicit a certain response. Threatening questions, questions that deal with non-normative, illegal, or private behaviors. These often lead to response bias via underreporting. And of course, when I ask you the question about marijuana, that can be a threatening question, because when marijuana was illegal, how am I going to get an accurate answer from you if you are actually smoking marijuana and it's illegal? So in a way, that was a threatening question. But I was just trying to get you to think about marijuana and whether it's good for you or not. Where were we yesterday? Oh, we were in Indianola, Iowa. Marijuana is illegal here. The only medical marijuana is legal, and we ate at a restaurant, and right next door was a CBD dispensary. It was a medical marijuana dispensary, and of course they were they would like to legalize marijuana because then they can make more money. But one of the questions, they had a sign outside, and it said, which kills more people, alcohol or marijuana? Then it talked about hangovers. Of course, you rarely have a hangover with marijuana. Of course, didn't talk about memory problems. But anyway, that's threatening questions. Double-barreled questions combine two or more questions in one. The problem with such question is that it might confuse respondents who agree with one aspect of the question but disagree with the other. Many questions that contain the word "and" are likely double-barreled questions. Domestic violence and gun violence are the most serious problems facing America today. Agree, disagree, depends, strongly disagree. Double-barreled questions. Questions with "and" can be used, however, if the dimensions separated by "and" are mutually exclusive, and the respondent is asked to select one or to rank them according to some criterion. For example, at the present time, the country is faced with two major problems: climate change and domestic violence. Which of these two problems would you say is more important, climate change or domestic violence? That's a good question. You might think that domestic violence is the most god-awful thing in the world, but gun violence, it's not that big a deal, or vice versa. Wording, the question must be worded so that the respondent understands it. If the respondents come from all walks of life, the interviewer should use words that can be understood by the average sixth grader. Researchers should avoid or qualify words that are open to interpretation. Each question should be worded so that the respondent understands its meaning and so that the question has the same meaning to each respondent. Wording example, the question, "Are you a liberal?" is too broad. You might be referring to the person's education, their politics, their profession, or their sex life. But a question such as, "Do you consider yourself liberal, politically I mean," instructs the respondent to use the political frame of reference in answering the question. Response set. A response set is the tendency to answer all questions in a specific direction, regardless of their content. This problem may arise when a set of questions is presented together with the same response format, especially when the questions all refer to the same topic. Investigators can avoid creating a response set by changing the question format, either by varying the response categories for each question or by distributing questions on a topic throughout the questionnaire, instead of placing them all together. Examples of a response set: if a set of questions reflects a pro-choice attitude regarding abortion, respondents who are against abortion may check all the same response categories. For example, all strongly disagree or all strongly agree, simply because they assume that these categories all express objection to abortion. Leading questions. A leading question is a question phrased in such a manner that it seems to the respondent that the researcher expects a certain answer. Respondents also tend to agree with statements that support accepted norms or are perceived as socially desirable. The way that issues are labeled and enhanced can have a substantial effect on public support for some issues. Researchers who are looking for distorted responses should generally avoid leading questions. An example of a leading question: a question designed to elicit general attitudes about the legality of immigration to the United States might read, "Do you favor or oppose providing undocumented immigrants living in the United States with a path to citizenship?" The same question phrased in a leading form might read, "Do you favor or oppose providing illegal immigrants living in the United States with amnesty?" A more subtle form of leading question might be, "Do you favor or oppose providing irregular immigrants living in the United States with amnesty?" Threatening questions. Threatening questions usually deal with behaviors that are illegal, contranormative, or private. Such questions may inquire about such subjects as drinking, drug use, or sexual practices. When they are presented with a threatening question, respondents are caught in a conflict between the role demands of the cooperative respondent, who responds truthfully to all the questions, and the tendency for people to present themselves positively. Respondents usually resolve the conflict not by refusing to answer, but by reporting that they did not engage in that particular activity, when in fact they did. The accuracy of the response is considerably increased by using a long introduction to the question rather than asking short questions. An example: in the short closed form, the item read, "In the past year, how often did you become intoxicated while drinking any kind of beverage?" In the long form, the respondents were first asked to provide their own word for intoxication. Sometimes people drink a little too much beer, wine, or whiskey so that they act different from usual. What word do you think we should use to describe people when they get that way so that you will know what we mean and feel comfortable talking about it? The intoxication item then read, "Occasionally people drink on an empty stomach or drink a little too much and become," the respondent's word. "In the past year, how often have you become," the respondent's word, "while drinking any kind of alcoholic beverage?" After creating the questionnaire, the researcher needs to work on introduction to explain the survey and encourage a high response rate. An introductory statement for a personal or telephone interview, a cover letter for a mail questionnaire, a homepage for an online survey. Introductions must succeed in overcoming any resistance or prejudice the respondent may have against the survey. Identify the sponsoring organization or the persons conducting the study. Explain the purpose of the study. Tell why it is important that the respondent answer the questionnaire. Assure the respondent that the information provided will be held in strict confidence. In general, cover letters for mail questionnaires and homepages for online surveys must be more detailed than introductory statements for personal or telephone interviews. And here's an example of a sample cover letter, and it's a really good one. And this is similar to the one that I wrote. Wait a minute. Exhibit 11.2. Online surveys, homepages must be designed with accessibility in mind, including font size and color, compatibility with voice recognition software programs, and so on. Since 2001, researchers who receive federal funding are required to make all electronic and information technology, including online surveys, accessible to persons with disabilities in accordance with the Federal Rehabilitation Act, Section 508. Instructions should be included with any questions that are not self-explanatory. The instructions may range from very simple ones, such as circle the appropriate category, to more complex guidelines that explain how to rank a set of priorities. And that is the end of chapter 11. Now let's talk about qualitative research. Field research is the most central strategy of data collection associated with qualitative methodology. Field research is defined as the study of people acting in the natural courses of their daily lives in order to learn firsthand about how they live, how they talk and behave, and what captivates and distresses them. Field work is carried out in natural settings, such as anthropologists living with remote tribes or sociologists sharing in and observing the daily life of a local community. Qualitative field research uses a process called analytic induction, in which researchers collect data, formulate hypotheses based on the data, test their hypotheses using the data, and attempt to develop a theory. The theory that they develop is sometimes called grounded theory because it arises out of and is directly relevant to the particular setting under study. The researcher's goal in developing grounded theory is to produce a set of propositions that explain the totality of a phenomenon. Qualitative researchers use examples of their observations and quotations from members of the group under study to support their theories. Participant observation: the investigator attempts to attain some kind of membership in or close attachment to the group that he or she wishes to study. The participant observer's role is to observe and participate in the lives and activities of their research participants. Participant observation often entails learning the language, habits, work patterns, leisure activities, and other aspects of the observed's daily lives. In a complete participant role, the researcher is wholly concealed. The research objectives are unknown to the observed, and the researcher attempts to become a member of the group under observation. The complete participant interacts with the observed as naturally as possible in whatever areas of the subject's life the researcher finds of interest. Complete participation has been justified on the grounds that it makes possible the study of inaccessible groups that do not reveal to outsiders certain aspects of their lives. Now, this is really kind of interesting because when I was working at Fort Belknap and I was thinking about doing research, even before I started doing any research whatsoever, I was accused of being one of these complete participant researchers. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't observing. I was just, I was just there. But and this got me into trouble because there were some people that were claiming that I was doing this. I was taking notes and whatnot. I was trying to become a member of the tribe. That kind of strange idea. And of course, and I wasn't actually doing anything at all. But a white guy that everybody seems to like and seems to be getting inside information about this, that, or the other. There were a lot of paranoid people around. One of them was the president of the college. Well, anyway, we won't go into that. I wasn't doing it. That's not what I was doing. So when I did come up with a research project, and I presented it, there were some people that claimed that I had been doing this all along and that I had written down all this information and all I was doing. This was a sham because I already had all this information. It was really kind of stupid. But there are a lot of paranoid people out there. Complete observer role: observe and extensively document the details, activities, habits, etc. of the research settings and of the research participants therein. Difficulties of complete participants: become too self-conscious or too immersed, deciding what to observe, recording observations, or taking notes is impossible on the spot, which can introduce selective bias and distortions through memory. So you have to run home and write all this stuff down. And I wasn't doing that, I can assure you. Ethnography, simply stated, is the study of people in their own environment through the use of methods such as participant observation and face-to-face interviewing. Ethnography is a unique type of qualitative method that, while drawing on many strategies like participant observation, is designed to yield insights that other methods cannot. Ethnography resists the urge to treat social phenomena as things in the world that exist and so should be studied, and instead privileges the dynamic nature of social phenomena in relational and transactional terms. Ethnography and participant observation share common traits. Each places considerable emphasis on describing the nature of social phenomena. Each often produces unstructured data that may not conform to pre-established categories and codes that the researcher may bring to the study. Both typically examine a small number of cases and require a substantial time investment by the researcher. Significant attention is given to interpretation, both on the part of the research participants and the researcher in the same sense of the data and findings. The first step in doing field research is to select a topic for investigation. The next stage of field research is to select and gain access to an appropriate research site. Geographic or other particular considerations will dictate the choice. Qualitative methods: what did you feel when you saw the free ice cream? Excited, a little scared. And why was that? Going native, researchers have who internalize the lifestyle of the group being studied and lose their objectivity, and that's known as going native. It comprises the findings of a research project. Some researchers even abandon their research projects to protect their adopted groups. And of course, if you were dealing with, let me give you Hell's Angels, a motorcycle gang, and all of a sudden you become part of the group, you might try to hide their drug usage or prostitution rings or whatever. If the researchers maintain too much distance, however, they are unable to fully understand or empathize with the group being studied. Now, one of the interesting things about my situation was that there were people at the college who said that you could only study indigenous peoples using qualitative methods, and this was the going thing back in the early 20s. And I was saying, well, qualitative methods are fine, but that has to do with interpretation. So what I want to do, I want to show something using quantitative methods, and that's what I did. I did quantitative research. So that was part of the argument as well. It's part of the reason that things went south fairly quickly. They thought that you could only do qualitative research dealing with native peoples, and I wanted to do quantitative research. Characteristics of the investigator are an important consideration in gaining access to a setting. For example, the gender, age, race, or ethnicity of the researcher, if different from the subjects, may create serious barriers in gaining access or in communication. That's the way it was with the president. She really didn't like me. The other thing was that she had worked on a military base, and because we were military, she didn't like that either. So there were some old biases that were in place. Contemporary field researchers have emphasized that the phase of establishing social relations is perhaps the most central aspect of field work. One basic requirement, the researcher understands the jargon used by the particular group. And of course, that was kind of interesting, trying to figure out. Well, I didn't have to worry about that because I did all my research quantitatively using surveys. Once field researchers have established relationships with members of the group, they are regarded as provisional group members. They learn how to behave in the group and to teach the observed how to act toward them. Next, field researchers are accepted as categorical members of the group. By this time, the rapport will have been established, areas of observation will be agreed on, and informants will be providing information. Leaving the field, this stage depends on the agreement the researcher and the subject reached when the study began, and on the kind of social relationships that develop during the research process. Field exit processes range from the quick and sharp defined to the gradual and drawn out. Leaving can be a recurring phenomenon when research needs require the researcher to leave and come back numerous times. Primary sources of data are what people say and do. Researchers may record the behavior they observe by writing notes, tape recording, and on occasion photographing or filming. In some cases, when the researcher's identity and purpose are known to the observed, recording can be done on the spot. Recording data questions to consider: is the report firsthand? What was the spatial location of the observer? Where were they in relation to what's going on? Did the research participant have any reason to give false or biased information? Is the report internally consistent? Can the report be validated by using other independent reports? Stop right there. I don't have enough paper and pens to keep your lies straight. May I suggest a personal recording device? Data analysis and qualitative field research is an ongoing process. Observers formulate hypotheses and note important themes throughout their studies. As the research progresses, some hypotheses are discarded, others are refined, and still others are formulated. Once researchers have identified support for their emerging hypotheses, their next step is to look for negative cases, instances that refute the hypotheses. Researchers will use observations to refine, reject, and formulate hypotheses throughout the research process. Coding field notes, a researcher may develop simple categories based on the characteristics of the people being observed and the events that occur. Researchers then use what they have learned to refine and sometimes redefine their categories. After each refinement, the researcher must review and refile all relevant field notes. During the process of categorization, that researchers develop tentative hypotheses. Finding patterns and coding is one of the things that you're going to have to do this week with your own research project. So if we were talking about the research that that I have proposed, I've talked about my own research. How did I code it? I didn't really have to code it because yes, I did. I had to code the trauma. The level of trauma. It actually gave me a score on a trauma score from the survey that I used. I had to code the number of years of education. So if they had a high school education and that's it, that was 12 years. And if they had 1 year of college, that's 13 years, all the way up to, I think I had one individual with a PhD. And he had, what did he have? 18 or something. 12, 4, no, he had 22 years of education. As humorous as that is. Okay, so that's how I coded the education. Gender, there was no coding. It was either a 1 or a 2. They were either male or female. Age was just a number. What else did I have? I had a culture identity score. from a survey, and it was just a number. So what about my loneliness scale? Well, the loneliness scale, all I'm dealing with is this score. And with the Navajo knowledge score, all I have is that score, how they did. Here I am, a teacher, so what do I do? I give them a quiz. A quiz to take. All right. Finding patterns, questions to consider. What type of behavior is it? What is the structure? How frequent is it used? What are its causes? What are its processes? What are its consequences? What are people's strategies? Written report, the culmination of a field research study, describes the background of the study, the theoretical framework guiding it, and the design and methodology of the study. Provides a detailed analysis and interpretation of data, explores what the findings imply in the terms of further analysis or public policy decisions. Qualitative data analysis and technology. Qualitative research can be enhanced by using technology, software programs designed for the analysis of qualitative data, referred to as computer-aided qualitative data analysis, can speed up the analysis and facilitate the coding process and generating the testing of theories. Also simplify the preparation of research reports. Software programs for qualitative research, QSR Nudist, Atlas TI, HyperResearch, MaxQDA, Navivo, open source software programs are also available for free. Doing qualitative research. QSR Nudist. Ethical, legal, and political dilemmas, use of deception and the impact such deception may have on the lives of those studied. And of course, there was no deception in my research. It was straightforward. Unanticipated effects that any kind of field work may have on the people being studied. Often field workers have more power than their hosts. Subjects may perceive field workers as sources of material resources, political connections, and social prestige. And I certainly didn't. Well, I was a college professor, so I don't know if that added to people wanting to let me help them at powwows. Governments and other political groups have become increasingly interested in who gets studied and in what ways. Particular relevance in cases where the results of research dealing with disadvantaged groups may have political and social implications. Many of these groups are now claiming the right to review both research proposals and pre-publication drafts of research reports. And that is the end of the chapter, so the end of both chapters. So I'll talk to you next week.